Christopher is going to tell us how to build a global image. And after that, I will take a little bit of time to talk about some of the strategic options that BVI has been exploring to build a little bit on some of the things that the Premier said this morning.
Thanks, Roger. Premier, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for asking me to join you here today. Whilst I'm based in London, I live in Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm not sure how many people have gone from snow in Newcastle to your beautiful weather here. We've been on board for about 90 days, so we're still very new into the job. And Broderick asked me to touch on how we aim to protect and ultimately build the reputation of the financial services sector. Since we started working for BVI, the IFC is in the process of repositioning itself as BVI Finance, as you know, which many of you I'm sure will have seen. So one of the first assignments is to work with the BVI Finance team to build a compelling narrative in order to ensure that BVI is positively differentiated from your competitors in the global financial services sector. No amount of positive editorial coverage alone is going to achieve this. Let me make that quite clear. I think the media is very dangerous, it's very powerful, but unless there is an integrated campaign of stakeholder engagement and content behind what we will help BVI Finance to do, it just won't work. So before I touch on some of those proposals, a quick look at some of those changing conditions ahead, many of which actually you've already heard about from Richard and others. There is little doubt amongst key stakeholders that unlike some other jurisdictions, BVI has a very authentic and perhaps enviable heritage in the sector. Robust regulation, British law, British professionals aim to set it apart, as do many supranationals in the respect that you gain from them. But as you're more than well aware, there is mounting pressure from Western governments, many of whom are in, as Richard said, dire straits, and other commentators about how to tackle so-called tax havens. And that term is dominating the environment in which you operate and will continue to do so, in my view. So within this, differentiating BVI is critical at a time when some would say your business is being fragmented, there are barriers to doing business. And of course, at the sharp end of these concerns are a number of major issues for BVI, most of which will be discussed today. Beneficial ownership we've talked about, Indian government's clampdown on tax evasion, Russia's ban on contracts with offshore-based companies, and China's anti-avoidance rules. So it is a changing picture ahead, and the reality is that these critical issues are the ones that are not going to go away. And certainly in the court of public opinion, they are all issues that you need to manage very carefully. So with all this in mind, what is the strategy to get there? When we presented to Broderick and his team late summer, the way that we explain this is in many ways future-proofing BVI, future-proofing what you do now in terms of changing legislation and changing market conditions. In order to protect the BVI's reputation as a financial centre, preserving your credibility and legitimacy at the same time as promoting the territory both in existing markets and also in emerging ones. And ultimately, in light of new legislation, changing legislation, positioning the BVI correctly amongst your competitors. You won't be able to read this, but I wanted to show it to you because explaining how we're going to do that is a bit difficult in a few minutes. But what you see here is an integrated program of activities starting from the bottom, very, very strong foundation activities such as crisis and issues preparedness and response mechanisms through to key relationship building with stakeholders, with media, international media, to a systematic and sustained, a consistent approach to stakeholder engagement. And ultimately, towards the top, perhaps, as the Premier referred to earlier on, breaking out of our bubble, punching above our weight, taking leaps, not steps, and considering entering debates about key issues which are supportive to BVI, which will get the media and commentator attention that no amount of changing legislation will. That is the reality of the issues that you face at the moment. All, of course, to effectively future-proof the BVI. Broderick and Russell asked me to touch within the proposed programme on thought leadership within our approach, which means being aware, being very aware of those bigger issues, many of which Richard has touched on, which fuel media speculation, stakeholder attention, ultimately, and the perception of BVI. Those big issues can't be ignored and stem from macroeconomic and political issues such as, you'll see here, economic slowdown in many countries, a widening gap between rich and poor, banks being bailed out, corporate greed, tax avoidance, financial crime, all of which make great stories in the international press. All those issues, of course, or many of those issues, are expected to be managed by politicians and governments across the world, many of whom are in the run-up to election, and therefore are looking to blame people. And it's never David Cameron's fault. Who always has to be on the side of the public and to be seen to be doing something about these critical issues. And ultimately, to make sure that it is working, or indeed it certainly looks like it's working. This perfect storm of story opportunities for those globally respected media who can and do move markets and do help to destroy or make global reputations are exactly the same sort of media, exactly the same commentators that we need to make sure are writing good things and positive things and rebalancing the perception of the BVI. Those stories to the right, which are a selection of recent headlines, are what we are up against. As I said before, no amount of positive organic news, of improved legislation, of improving product suite from the BVI is going to counter those very, very powerful headlines. So it's the potential of taking ownership of a constructive big issue where we feel the reputation of the BVI can be positively influenced. This is not in any way, to make this clear, to ignore the dramatic challenges of growing and continuing to protect your business here in the BVI. But what it is about is rebalancing the perception that the media and other commentators have of BVI by looking at issues that are the right ones for you. Becoming synonymous as the leading commentator with the right issue will provide the BVI with additional opportunities to shift your reputation. Finding the issue is difficult. And has to be a combination of playing to the BVI strengths, recognizing where there is a current vacuum of commentary, and also managing those current issues or zeitgeist issues which are relevant for today and the future. Once, of course, the right issue is agreed, involving a credible third party, Richard and I were talking last night about the importance and opportunity of using academics, of using economic commentators to generate credible, original content which will demonstrate, for example, the contribution that financial services makes to the BVI economy, the contribution that BVI makes to global wealth, and indeed the way that by using BVI there are many added benefits for others in and around other economies. So this big issue, we feel, it provides a real opportunity. It inspires debate. It allows you to interface and rebalance those perceptions from the stories that I mentioned earlier. And it is at a stage where engaging with stakeholders, such as key media, politicians, through digital channels, through one-to-one engagement, provides you with an authenticity beyond the ongoing debate, as well as the ongoing debate about changing legislation and where you're going. Finally, in order to optimize the right approach, to make sure that we're getting to people and talking to people in the way they want to be heard, or you want to be heard, sorry, we must make sure that we're using the right channels here. And with this in mind, research last year tells us that international investors and opinion formers are best influenced in two ways. To the left, 4 boxes, third-party endorsement is very clear. You're not just saying this yourself, someone else is saying it. Intelligence reports or white papers, clearly editorial media, and of course on the right, personal engagement from one-to-one meetings to trade conferences and social media. That bottom box should read broadcast business media as well. So we need to make sure that we're getting to them in the right place. And this is, in our view, how best to sustain the awareness of brand BVI, to ultimately increase mindshare, and build and preserve what the new BVI should be. Thank you.